Picture this. It's 1908, and Henry Ford hasn't even released the Model T yet. Some Belgian engineer you've never heard of walks into an automotive exhibition in Paris with a car that combines electric and gasoline power, a hybrid 100 years before the Prius made Toyota famous. The automotive world looked at Henri Peeper's creation and basically said, "That's cute, but no thanks." Biggest mistake in automotive history. The world in 1908. To understand why Peeper's hybrid was so revolutionary, you need to understand what absolute chaos the automotive world was in 1908. This wasn't like today where everyone knows cars have gas engines. Back then, nobody knew what the hell would win. It was a three-way brawl with no clear victor. Electric cars were actually dominating the market. Yeah, you heard that right. In 1908, electrics outsold gasoline cars. They were quiet, clean, easy to start. No hand cranking that could break your arm. Rich people loved them. Your grandmother could drive one. High society ladies would cruise down Fifth Avenue in their electric coupes like they were driving living rooms. The problem was range. About 40 miles on a good day. 50 if you were lucky and drove like someone's grandfather on Sunday. Plan a trip beyond that? Better hire a horse and buggy. Gasoline cars had the opposite problem. Unlimited range, theoretically, as long as you could find fuel, which was its own adventure in 1908. Gasoline stations didn't exist yet. You bought fuel at pharmacies, hardware stores, sometimes from the back of traveling salesmen's trucks. But they were loud, dirty, unreliable, and starting them was literally dangerous. The hand crank could kick back and shatter your arm. People died from starting their cars, not crashing them, starting them. Broken jaws, broken wrists, fractured skulls from kickback. Starting your car required genuine physical courage. Steam cars were still in the mix too. The Stanley steamer could do 80 miles per hour, which in 1908 was basically supersonic. But they took 30 minutes to start while you built up steam pressure. They needed constant water refills, carrying your own supply or stopping at every creek and pump. And they had a tendency to explode if you didn't know what you were doing. Boiler explosions were rare, but spectacular. The kind of thing that made newspapers. So here's the automotive landscape in 1908. 3 competing technologies, all of them terrible in different ways. Electric cars that couldn't go anywhere. Gas cars that could kill you just by starting them. Steam cars that needed a full-time engineer to operate. Pick your poison. Detroit, or more accurately, the American automotive industry centered in Michigan, was placing its bets on gasoline. Not because it was better, necessarily, but because it had the best balance of power and range. The internal combustion engine was crude, inefficient, probably making 20% thermal efficiency if you were lucky, but it worked well enough. Good enough was beating perfect. The electric car manufacturers saw the writing on the wall. They knew range was killing them. Some tried bigger batteries. That made the cars heavier, which reduced range, which required bigger batteries. Vicious cycle of diminishing returns. Others tried battery swap stations, which is actually kind of brilliant, but the infrastructure costs were insane. You'd need stations every 40 miles across the entire country. A few engineers wondered if maybe, just maybe, you could combine the 2 technologies. Use the electric motor for starting and low speeds, where electrics excelled. Use the gas engine for highway cruising, where combustion engines were better. It seemed logical. Seemed obvious, really. Except for one tiny problem. Nobody knew how to do it. The engineering challenges were massive. How do you connect an electric motor and a gas engine to the same drivetrain? How do you control which one operates when? What happens when you switch between them? The transmission technology didn't exist. The control systems didn't exist. The batteries couldn't handle the cycling. The engines couldn't deal with the constant starting and stopping. Materials science wasn't advanced enough. Manufacturing tolerances weren't tight enough. Every engineer who looked at the hybrid concept came to the same conclusion. Great idea in theory, impossible in practice. The complexity would be nightmarish. The weight would be prohibitive. The cost would be astronomical. And even if you solved all those problems, who would buy it? Rich people wanted simple electrics. Adventurous people wanted powerful gas cars. Nobody wanted complicated. The market didn't exist. Henri Peeper looked at all these objections and said, "Hold my beer." Actually, he was Belgian, so probably, "Hold my Trappist ale." Enter Henri Peeper. Henri Peeper was born in 1864 in Liège, Belgium. By 1908, he was 44 years old and already a successful inventor and manufacturer. He'd built one of the first electric vehicles in Belgium back in 1899. Not just a toy, a real working electric car that people actually bought. Real production, real customers, real money. But Peeper wasn't just another electric car manufacturer watching his market die. He was a legitimate engineer who understood both electrical and mechanical systems at a level that would make modern engineers jealous. He designed electric motors for industrial applications, big, heavy-duty units that ran factory equipment. He'd built gasoline engines for motorcycles. He knew the strengths and weaknesses of both technologies intimately, not from textbooks, from actually building the damn things with his own hands. While Detroit was busy arguing about which single technology would dominate, having the same tired debate at every automotive conference, Peeper was thinking differently. Why choose? Why not use both? It seems obvious now, but in 1908, this was heresy. You were either Team Electric or Team Gasoline. Pick a side. Here's what made Peeper special. He wasn't an automotive guy trying to learn electrical engineering. He wasn't an electrical engineer dabbling in cars. He was both. He'd literally built electric motors and gasoline engines with his own hands. He understood the problem space in a way that nobody else did. Detroit had specialists. Peeper was a generalist who saw connections others missed. In 1905, 3 years before the car we're talking about, Peeper filed a patent for a hybrid vehicle system. Not a theoretical proposal. Not a sketch on a napkin. Not some vague idea he planned to work out later. A fully worked out design with detailed drawings, specifications, and solutions to all the major engineering challenges. The patent is still available today. You can look it up, it's remarkably complete. The patent described a system where an electric motor was integrated directly into the drivetrain between the engine and the wheels. The electric motor could operate independently at low speeds. The gas engine could take over at higher speeds. Or, and here's where it gets brilliant, they could work together for maximum power. 3 modes of operation in one system. Nobody had done this. Peeper also figured out regenerative braking in 1905. Let that sink in for a second. The technology that Toyota would patent and profit from a century later, Peeper invented in 1905. When you slowed down, the electric motor would act as a generator, turning kinetic energy back into electricity and charging the batteries. Instead of wasting all that energy as heat in the brakes, you'd recapture some of it. Physics doesn't care what year it is. This wasn't theoretical. Peeper built a working prototype. Then he built production models. By 1908, he was actually selling hybrid cars. Not many, but some. Mostly in Belgium, where he had manufacturing facilities and a reputation. Actual customers driving actual hybrid cars on actual roads in 1908. The 1908 model was his masterpiece. He'd refined the design, solved the reliability issues that plagued the early prototypes, and created something that actually worked. Not perfectly, not flawlessly, but it worked better than it had any right to. Better than Detroit said was possible. Peeper brought his hybrid to the Paris Salon in 1908, the most important automotive exhibition in the world. If you wanted to make a splash in the automotive industry, Paris was where you did it. Ford showed cars there. Mercedes showed cars there. Every major manufacturer came to Paris to show their latest innovations, and Peeper showed up with a car from the future. The technical miracle. Let's talk about how this thing actually worked, because the engineering is genuinely brilliant. The heart of Peeper's system was what he called a motor generator unit. It was an electric motor that could also function as a generator. This wasn't revolutionary by itself. Electric motors and generators are basically the same thing running in different directions. But Peeper's design integrated this unit directly into the drivetrain in a way nobody had done before. The motor generator sat between the gasoline engine and the transmission. Think of it as a mechanical sandwich. Gas engine, electric motor, transmission, wheels. This meant the electric motor could drive the wheels directly, bypassing the gas engine entirely, or the gas engine could drive the wheels, with the electric motor freewheeling, or both could work together. The gasoline engine was a simple single-cylinder unit, nothing fancy. Maybe 3 horsepower, which sounds pathetic, but remember, we're talking 1908. Ford's Model T made 20 horsepower, and that was considered pretty good. The engine was air-cooled, direct drive, about as simple as you could get. The electric motor added another 3 horsepower, 6 horsepower total. In a car that weighed maybe 800 pounds, that's not terrible actually. Power-to-weight ratio was similar to other cars of the era. But here's where Peeper's genius shows. He didn't just bolt an electric motor and a gas engine together and hope for the best. He engineered the system so they worked together intelligently. At low speeds, say under 10 miles per hour, only the electric motor ran. Silent, smooth, perfect for city driving. This solved the biggest problem with gas engines at the time, starting in low-speed operation. Gas engines in 1908 were terrible at low speeds. They'd stall, buck, cough, die. The electric motor eliminated all that. Once you got above 10 miles per hour, the gas engine would automatically engage. There was a centrifugal clutch system that Peeper designed. As the electric motor spun faster, centrifugal force would gradually engage the gas engine's clutch. The transition was automatic and relatively smooth. Now both systems were running. The gas engine handled the cruising load. The electric motor helped during acceleration. If you needed to pass someone or climb a hill, both motors would combine their power. 6 horsepower doesn't sound like much, but it was 6 horsepower more than the other guy had. Here's the regenerative braking system, and this is where Peeper was truly ahead of his time. When you took your foot off the accelerator, the electric motor would automatically switch to generator mode. The wheels would drive the motor, which would generate electricity and charge the batteries. This had 2 effects. First, it slowed the car down, giving you engine braking. Second, it recovered energy that would otherwise be lost. The batteries were lead acid, same as everyone else used. Nothing special there. About 40 pounds worth, tucked under the seat. They provided enough juice for maybe 5 miles of pure electric driving. Not great, but remember, the gas engine could keep them charged. The control system was entirely mechanical, no electronics, obviously. This was 1908. The clutches were centrifugal and speed activated. The generator switching was automatic based on whether the motor was being driven or driving. Peeper used a combination of springs, weights, and mechanical linkages to make everything work together. The transmission was a simple 2-speed manual. You still had to shift gears, but the electric motor made it much easier. No stalling, no lugging, no drama. Weight distribution was carefully considered. The engine was in front. The motor generator was in the middle. The batteries were low and centered. The whole car weighed about 850 pounds, which was actually lighter than many pure electric cars of the era. The fuel tank held about 2 gallons. Combined with the batteries, Peeper claimed a range of over 100 miles. That's double what pure electrics could do. And unlike pure electrics, you could refill the gas tank in minutes and keep going. The specifications sound modest by modern standards, but let me put this in context. Peeper had created a car that could drive on pure electric power in the city, could cruise on gasoline on the highway, could combine both for maximum acceleration, recovered energy during braking, had double the range of electrics and none of the starting problems of gas cars. He'd solved every major problem with both electric and gasoline vehicles in 1908. The cost was high, about twice the price of a basic gas car, but comparable to a nice electric car. For someone who wanted the best of both worlds, it wasn't unreasonable. The performance that shocked everyone. The performance testing of Peeper's hybrid was where things got really interesting, because this wasn't just a theoretical design or a proof of concept. This thing actually worked. In 1907, Peeper entered one of his hybrids in a Paris to Bordeaux reliability trial, 300 miles through French countryside, hills, bad roads, the works. Pure electric cars couldn't even attempt this distance. Many gas cars broke down or ran out of fuel. Peeper's hybrid completed the entire run. Average speed was about 25 miles per hour, which doesn't sound impressive until you remember we're talking about 1907 on terrible roads. It used 12 gallons of gasoline total. That's 25 miles per gallon. In 1907. Most gas cars at the time got maybe 10 miles per gallon if you were lucky. The electric system handled all the low-speed work in towns. The gas engine took over on the open road. During one particularly steep hill climb near Bordeaux, the hybrid passed several larger, more powerful gas cars that were overheating. Why? Because the electric motor could help with the extra load, preventing the gas engine from overworking itself. Independent testing, done by French automotive magazines, showed some remarkable numbers. 0 to 15 miles per hour in 6 seconds. That was quicker than most gas cars because electric motors have instant torque. The transition from electric to gas was so smooth that many test drivers didn't even notice when it happened. The regenerative braking system was tested on a long downhill section. The batteries were intentionally run down before the descent. After 4 miles of downhill driving, the batteries had recovered about 30% of their charge. This was energy that would have been completely wasted as heat in the brakes on any other car. Fuel consumption tests showed the hybrid used about 40% less gasoline than a comparable gas car for city driving. Highway consumption was similar to gas cars, but the ability to recover energy during deceleration made a real difference in mixed driving. A Belgian doctor bought one and kept detailed logs. Over 18 months and 3,000 miles, he reported only one mechanical failure, a broken spring in the clutch mechanism. That's it. The hybrid system itself never failed. Compare this to gas cars of the era, which needed constant attention, frequent repairs, and regular overhauls. The same doctor noted that he never had to hand crank his car. Ever. The electric motor handled all starting duties. In 1908, this was a massive deal. Women could drive the hybrid without needing help to start it. This might not sound significant now, but in the early 1900s, the physical challenge of starting a gas car was a major barrier to adoption. A racing version was built and tested at Brooklands in England. It managed 52 miles per hour. Not competitive with pure racing cars, but respectable. More importantly, it could maintain that speed for hours without overheating, something many gas cars couldn't do. The fuel range testing was particularly impressive. One endurance run achieved 143 miles on 2 gallons of gas plus battery assist. That's more than 70 miles per gallon equivalent. Nobody would match this efficiency again until Honda started building hybrids in the 1990s. But here's what really shocked people. A demonstration at the Paris Salon showed the hybrid starting and stopping in city traffic for 2 hours straight. No coughing, no stalling, no hand cranking. Just smooth, reliable operation. Gas car manufacturers watched this demonstration with what can only be described as horror. Their cars couldn't do this. Not reliably. The engineering press wrote glowing reviews. Lotto magazine called it the car of the future. Scientific American mentioned it briefly, noting the ingenious combination of motors. Technical journals analyzed the patents and declared the system theoretically sound. So why didn't it change the world? Detroit's response. The American automotive industry's response to Peeper's hybrid was predictably dismissive. And by American, I mean Detroit, because by 1908, Michigan had become the center of the automotive world. Henry Ford looked at the hybrid concept and basically laughed. Ford's entire philosophy was simplicity and low cost. The Model T, which launched in 1908, the same year as Peeper's Paris show, was designed to be dead simple. One engine, one transmission, minimal parts. Ford's engineers calculated that the hybrid system would add at least $200 to the cost of a car. The Model T sold for $850. Nobody was going to pay 25% more for complexity. General Motors, still in its infancy, took a different approach. They sent engineers to Europe to examine the hybrid. Their report survives in GM's archives. The conclusion was that while technically impressive, the hybrid solved problems that American consumers didn't care about. Americans had wide-open roads and cheap gasoline. Range wasn't an issue. Fuel economy wasn't a selling point. Starting difficulties could be solved with better cranks and eventually electric starters. That last point is key. In 1912, just 4 years after Peeper's hybrid, Cadillac introduced the electric starter on the Model 30. Boom. The biggest advantage of the hybrid, electric starting, was now available on any gas car. Why buy a complicated, expensive hybrid when you could get electric starting on a normal car? The American automotive press barely covered Peeper's hybrid. A few technical journals mentioned it, but the mainstream automotive magazines, which by 1908 were substantial publications, mostly ignored it. When they did mention it, the tone was dismissive. European eccentricity, unnecessary complexity, a solution in search of a problem. But here's where it gets interesting. Ford and GM didn't just dismiss the hybrid. They actively worked to ensure it couldn't gain a foothold in America. Ford's dealer network was already massive by 1908. Ford made it clear to dealers that they were selling Model Ts and nothing else. The distribution advantage was insurmountable. Peeper had no dealers in America, no service network, no parts supply chain. Patents were another weapon. Ford's legal team was notorious for aggressive patent litigation. They would sue anyone who threatened Ford's dominance. Peeper's patents were European. Bringing them to America would mean expensive legal battles against Ford's army of lawyers. Peeper was a small manufacturer. He couldn't afford that fight. The real nail in the coffin was vertical integration. By 1910, Ford controlled his own steel mills, rubber plantations, and glass factories. He could produce cars at a cost nobody else could match. Even if Peeper's hybrid was better, Ford could simply undercut him on price until he went bankrupt. General Motors took a different but equally effective approach. They bought up or crushed electric car manufacturers. By controlling the electric car market, they ensured there was no viable alternative to gas cars. The hybrid didn't fit their business model. They ignored it to death. European manufacturers were more interested, but they had their own problems. World War I was coming. European industry would be devastated. The automotive sector would pivot to military production. By the time the war ended, the gas car had won. The hybrid was forgotten. The automotive establishment's response to Peeper's hybrid followed a pattern we've seen repeated throughout history. First, ignore it. Then dismiss it as impractical. Finally, wait for circumstances to change and claim the idea was never needed anyway. The death of the dream. Peeper's hybrid company struggled through the early 1910s. He'd proven the technology worked. He'd sold a few dozen cars, maybe 40 total, but he couldn't scale up production. The economics just didn't work, and the numbers were brutal. Each hybrid took significantly longer to build than a gas car. The motor generator unit had to be precisely aligned. We're talking thousandths of an inch precision with 1910s manufacturing equipment. The control system needed careful adjustment. Every clutch, every spring, every mechanical linkage had to be set just right, or the whole system would bind up or fail. The batteries required special handling. Lead-acid batteries are temperamental. Too much vibration and the plates would crack. Too much heat and they'd dry out. Skilled labor was expensive and scarce. You couldn't just hire any mechanic off the street. You needed guys who understood both electrical and mechanical systems. In 1910, those people barely existed. Meanwhile, Ford was producing Model Ts by the thousands using assembly line techniques. By 1913, Ford was making over 1,000 cars per day. 1,000 per day. Peeper was making maybe one per week, on a good week. The cost gap was insurmountable. Ford could sell a Model T for $500 and still make a profit. Peeper needed to charge $1,500 just to break even. The electric starter killed the hybrid's main selling point. By 1913, most mid-range cars had electric starters. Cadillac introduced theirs in 1912 and won awards for it. Suddenly, every manufacturer was adding them. The hybrid's advantage of easy starting disappeared overnight. Why buy a complicated hybrid when a regular car could start just as easily with the push of a button? The hybrid's killer feature became standard equipment on normal cars. Fuel prices stayed low. In America especially, gasoline was cheap and getting cheaper as oil production ramped up. Texas oil fields were gushing. Pennsylvania refineries were running full tilt. Gas was selling for 15 cents a gallon. Nobody cared about fuel economy. Americans wanted power and speed, not efficiency. Bigger engines, more cylinders, more displacement. That's what sold cars. World War I destroyed what little market existed. European manufacturers shifted to military production. Tanks, trucks, aircraft engines. Resources like copper and lead, crucial for electric motors and batteries, were rationed for the war effort. Car production plummeted. Civilian manufacturing basically stopped. When the war ended, the automotive landscape had completely changed. Gas cars had won. The debate was over. Peeper died in 1915, heart attack at age 51, probably from stress. His company limped along for a few more years, building conventional cars just to stay alive. The hybrid system was quietly abandoned. Too expensive, too complicated, not enough demand. The last hybrid rolled out sometime in 1917. Nobody recorded the exact date. Nobody cared. The patents expired. The few remaining hybrids ended up in museums or junkyards. Most were scrapped for their copper and lead during the war. The knowledge was lost. By the 1920s, hybrid cars were historical curiosities, briefly mentioned in engineering textbooks as an interesting but impractical experiment. A footnote, a dead end. What's tragic is how close Peeper came to succeeding. He'd solved all the technical problems. The cars worked. They were reliable, efficient, practical. But he couldn't overcome the economic and industrial momentum favoring simple gas cars. Sometimes being right isn't enough. The century-long wait fast forward to 1997. Toyota introduces the Prius, the world's first mass-produced hybrid car. The automotive press loses its mind. This is revolutionary. Nobody's ever thought of this before. Toyota is a genius. Except, someone did think of it before. 89 years before. The Prius uses the same basic concept as Peeper's hybrid. Electric motor for low speeds, gas engine for cruising, both working together for acceleration. Regenerative braking to recover energy. Toyota added computers and sophisticated controls, obviously. But the fundamental architecture? That's Peeper's design from 1908. Toyota spent millions developing the Prius. Hundreds of engineers worked for years perfecting the system, and they created essentially what Peeper had built in his workshop a century earlier. The difference was timing. By 1997, the world cared about fuel economy. Gas prices were rising. Environmental concerns were real. Consumers wanted efficiency. The market was ready for hybrids. Also, computers changed everything. Peeper's mechanical control system was clever but limited. Modern hybrids use sophisticated computers to optimize the transition between electric and gas. They can vary the split second by second based on dozens of inputs. This makes modern hybrids far more efficient than Peeper's version. But the core idea? That's pure Peeper. Toyota has made billions from hybrid technology. the Prius became a cultural icon. Honda, Ford, GM, every manufacturer now builds hybrids. The technology Peeper invented and Detroit dismissed is now standard. Think about what we lost. If the automotive industry had embraced hybrids in the 1910s, we might have skipped the entire 20th century of pure gas cars. Imagine cities in the 1930s with hybrid vehicles. Imagine winning World War II with fuel-efficient military vehicles. Imagine decades of reduced oil consumption, cleaner air, lower emissions. Instead, we spent a century burning gasoline as fast as we could pump it. And when we finally came full circle to Peeper's solution, we acted like it was brand new. The irony is delicious and depressing in equal measure. The story of Henri Peeper's hybrid isn't really about cars. It's about innovation and inertia. About how industries become locked into particular solutions not because they're best, but because they're established. Peeper proved hybrids worked. The technology was sound. The benefits were real. But the automotive industry ignored him because change was expensive and inconvenient. Detroit had invested in gas cars. Retooling would cost money. Why bother? This pattern repeats throughout history. Brilliant innovations get ignored or suppressed because they don't fit the existing business model. The establishment dismisses outsiders, and progress gets delayed by decades or centuries. What's most frustrating is how much time we wasted. Peeper handed the automotive industry a solution to fuel efficiency in 1908. We threw it away. A century later, we reinvented it and pretended it was new. Maybe the real lesson is that timing matters as much as innovation. Peeper was right, but he was early. Too early. The world wasn't ready for his idea. Sometimes being first just means being forgotten. Or maybe the lesson is that innovation belongs to whoever's brave enough to attempt it, and stubborn enough to wait until the world catches up. Peeper didn't live to see his vindication, but his idea survived. A century late, but it survived. Every time you see a Prius, remember Henri Peeper, the Belgian engineer who built a hybrid in 1908 and showed us the future. Too bad it took us 100 years to notice.